I upload daily NBA content on this channel, so if that is something that interests you, then subscribe. Also drop a like on this video. It only takes 1 second and it makes a massive difference. Also, real quick, if you have not yet, there is a new episode of my NBA series, so go check that one out if you haven't watched it yet. The Sacramento Kings a year ago were kind of the NBA Cinderella story. The trio of Darren Fox, Buddy Hield, and Marvin Bagley, combined with role players like Harrison Barnes, Bogdan Bogdanovic, and Nemanja Bjelica, got the Kings the 9th seed in the Western Conference. However, in the offseason, the Kings decided that one of the main catalysts for their success of this team, Dave Joerger, should be fired and they should bring in coaching phenom Luke Walton. On top of that, this Kings team decided that in the regular season, they were going to start an internal conflict with Buddy Hield after they gave him the max contract that they previously had a conflict about. Also, it wasn't quite max, but you know what I mean. So they went about pissing him off after they already resolved what they pissed him off for originally. The justification for this was that the team had Bogdan Bogdanovic as the backup plan, who was arguably a better player than Hield. But then in this year's offseason, they let Bogdan walk. Well, actually, they let him walk only after botching a sign-and-trade, where they didn't bother informing the player who was going to be signed and traded that he was going to be signed and traded, which that's not how a sign and trade works. So heading into next season, the Kings still have Fox, Hield, and Marvin Bagley, which is good, but what's not good is you lost a valuable asset for nothing, and someone else that's returning is Luke Walton. So the direction of this franchise is not exactly positive, and unfortunately because of all of these factors, I think the Kings are going to be one of the worst teams in the league. Let's go over the depth chart for this team. At point, we obviously have Darren Fox. At the 2 is Buddy Hield, Harrison Barnes as the 3, Marvin Bagley at power forward, and then I have Hassan Whiteside as the center. Now, to me, Richaun Holmes is better than Whiteside. However, I can't think of anything more Sacramento Kings than starting a guy like Hassan Whiteside. Off of the bench is Corey Joseph, Tyrese Halliburton at the 2, Bjelica at small forward, even though he really isn't made to play that position, Frank Kaminsky at power forward, which he really isn't meant to play either, and then Richaun Holmes. So at point, Darren Fox is practically the only thing that gives Sacramento Kings fans hope. He is a very good playmaker, very fast, very good attacking the basket, solid defensively, and he has shown a lot of great leadership qualities. I believe he's a future perennial all-star. The only real question for him is the jump shot. He had a bad three-point shooting season this year and an okay one in his sophomore year. He isn't a bad mid-range shooter, but with him being a poor free throw shooter, I don't have high hopes of him ever becoming more than just an okay shooter. But I still think he can be a very good player regardless. Buddy Hield is an interesting case, especially because he seemed to have made it clear that he wants out of Sacramento, despite the fact that now he is the clear-cut starter. On top of that, he is one of those players who people seem to think is younger than he is. Buddy Hield is basically a 90-year-old man. He is in the prime of his career. At the age of 28, he basically is what he is. I don't know why people are expecting him to make a leap like he's a 22-year-old. He's not. Buddy likely is what he is. And what he is a very good three-point shooter, like one of the best in the league, but he's also not a great shot creator, a pretty bad defensive player, and he seems pretty damn moody. He's basically a dramatic JJ Redick with more shot creating ability, which is a fine player to have, but I wouldn't want to pay that player $100 million over 4 years. But what I find interesting from the franchise's perspective is that they have gone about pissing him off by bringing him off of the bench, and then they didn't fire the horrible coach who brought them off of the bench, and then they gave up their backup plan, and then they're treating Buddy Hield like everything's just fine. It's certainly an interesting strategy. Like, what if I pissed off option A because I have option B, then I let option B go for nothing, then I just treated option A like nothing happened? That's certainly not a great idea. Harrison Barnes was the subject of my second ever NBA video, which makes me feel weirdly attached to him. Don't worry about what that video is about. It's certainly not about how Harrison Barnes could potentially be a franchise player for the Dallas Mavericks. It definitely wouldn't be anything stupid like that. Barnes is a 3-and-D wing who can play both forward positions and create a little bit off of the dribble. He's a pretty solid player to have. Yeah. It almost feels like Marvin Bagley hasn't even played in the NBA. He's a pretty damn good offensive prospect, but he's played like 75 of 157 games in his career thus far, and it's getting to the point where I'm genuinely very worried for him. If Bagley can play a majority of the season, I could see the Kings being at least a pretty good offensive team, but I don't know how realistic that is at this point. At center, Hassan Whiteside is a very weird case. If you didn't know anything about the guy and you just looked at his basketball reference, you would think he was one of the best centers in the NBA. I mean, 15, 13, and 3 on 62% from the field in just 30 minutes a game? This guy is crazy good. But in reality, Hassan Whiteside is a slow-footed big who can't step outside of the paint on either end. His rebounding is admittingly good, but he's ultimately a negative defender because of his lack of versatility and ability to defend other positions, despite his ability to block shots. And then on offense, he's not a bad finisher, and he can get some offensive rebounds, but he also can't stretch the floor, can't really set a screen and roll because he's the slowest man alive, and even though he can't stretch the floor, he sometimes attempts dumb mid-range jump shots. I don't know why he keeps doing that. On top of that, he is possibly the lowest effort basketball player that I have ever witnessed, and I watched myself play basketball on footage a couple months ago, so that's saying a lot. He is basically the walking embodiment of a guy who plays for the stats and not for the winning, and as long as he gets those stats, he's happy. I think Richaun Holmes is a good bit better. He is someone who brings in energy, has the speed to handle his business defensively on the perimeter, and more importantly, he seems to at least somewhat care if his team wins or not. The bench unit for this team is weird. Corey Joseph is a fine backup point guard, although he is overpaid. Tyrese Halliburton, I imagine, will be the backup shooting guard. That's the Kings' most recent lottery pick. He's a 6'5" combo guard who shoots the 3 ball very well and is a solid playmaker. I imagine he'd be the primary ball handler off of the bench and Joseph would play more off ball, but he's someone to keep an eye on this team. As I said before, Bjelica is not a small forward, and Frank Kaminsky really isn't a power forward, so I would suggest this team either trades for or signs some sort of small forward and then just cuts Frank Kaminsky out of the rotation and plays Bjelica at the 4, because Frank Kaminsky isn't very good and Bjelica cannot play small forward. So if you're being nice, you can look at this roster and actually find some reasons to be at least semi-optimistic. When looking at just the talent, Darren Fox I think could have his first All-Star year. Buddy Hield, if he calms down, is still a pretty damn good player. A healthy season of Bagley could go a long way, and there's some pretty solid role players on this team as well. At least offensively, there is a foundation to be decent. But unfortunately, there is more to basketball than talent. And even more unfortunately, since Jim Boylen has been fired, the Sacramento Kings now have the title of the worst coach team in the league. Luke Walton is just horrible, and he's really the main reason I think the Kings will be bad this year, because otherwise, I would bet on them being better than teams like the Spurs, Grizzlies, and maybe even the Pelicans or Timberwolves, provided that they were healthy and Walton's replacement was an average coach. But I had the luxury of learning last year that really bad coaching can really taint the effectiveness of a team, especially a younger team. The Kings don't have it as bad as the Bulls did because Jim Boylen set a really high bar for incompetence, but they're still in a very bad spot with Luke Walton. On top of that, I would not be shocked to see Buddy Hield demand a trade. He has liked a bunch of different posts on different social media platforms talking about him being traded elsewhere. It seems the Philadelphia 76ers are one of his preferred destinations, although he is also on a 4-year contract, so it could just be tough shit for him, which, like, cool, you can keep him, but then also having a player in your locker room who does not want to be there can be cancerous, and it can be a huge issue. And then finally, the defensive talent on this team is real bad. Fox is okay. Harrison Barnes is a little bit better than okay. Off of the bench, Holmes is pretty solid, but literally, that is it defensively. Buddy is bad defensively. Bagley is really bad defensively. As I said, Hassan Whiteside is a negative defensively. Bjelica is a poor defender. Frank Kaminsky is a poor defender. Corey Joseph really isn't a defender. It's just bad. So while this team could actually be pretty good offensively with the playmaking and talent of Darren Fox, the shooting of Hield, all the other shooters on this team, this actually is a pretty good shooting team. A full season of Marvin Bagley would go a long way for their offense. Even though they do have those foundations to be decent offensively, the horrible defense and the incompetent coaching, as well as potential internal struggle because of the Buddy Hield situation, I believe is going to prevent the Kings from being good at all this year, and I think it's going to be preventing them from doing anything of interest this season. So this is why I believe the Sacramento Kings will be, is it the 5th worst team in the league? I think it is. Yeah. So RIP Kings fans, free Darren Fox. Again, if you have not yet, go check out that My NBA video. It's on the second round of the playoffs. We played the Milwaukee Bucks, so go see how that worked out. But yeah, shout out to Rudy for editing this video. That is the end of this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe for more NBA content like this, and cue the outro music.